This morning I had the chance to sit down with Mike Pappas and Gary Hughes of Dead Air Armament. Now these guys have been around suppressors for a long time. I mean, there's a lot of R&D and experience coming from these guys. So it was really great experience to be able to sit down and talk to them about all the stuff that they've learned over the years, and to be able to share that with you is pretty cool. So stay tuned and see what they have to say. So you guys have been in like the NFA world for like ever. Like what got you into it? Either of you.
Oh, that's a good question. I wanted a machine gun. That's what got me into it.
Yeah.
Yes.
How long ago was this?
This was, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the form, but let's just say I had just a gorgeous mane of hair. God, it looked good. I missed that, but whatever. It's been a while.
Nice. How about you, Gary?
I shot an unsuppressed M4 in a little teeny area on a law enforcement training thing I was working on, and had no hearing protection, and my left ear started ringing and never stopped. So pretty much the next day I started looking into hearing protection my gun could wear.
Nice.
So that kind of got me into it, and I didn't do a machine gun first. I did a 5.56 rifle can.
Nice.
Long time ago.
My first can was for that same Mac 11.
He did both.
Cool. So, I mean, with suppressors, there's no perfect suppressor. You know, it's like some are designed for precision or battle, whatever. It's like, and there's always a give or take. It's like lightweight versus heavy. You know, how do you guys balance out weight and length and all that stuff to come up with, you know, a perfect suppressor for, say, tactical use?
It depends on application. We aren't a one-size-fits-all company. A lot of the current trend in silencers has been to be the, as Mike likes to call it, the crescent wrench approach, where they try to sell you one silencer to do everything that you've got. Well, when you do that, frequently you end up with a tool that, while it works, is not ideal in any situation. So our approach has been much more to build silencers that fit a given application very, very well. So that's why we make more than one rifle silencer. You know, they're different cans for different applications. And so depending on the application, you can get a silencer that's very, very close to perfect, if you will, for your particular application, or at least as good as current technology provides. But you can't do it on everything from a 10-inch 5.56 to a 300 Win Mag. It doesn't work that way. So you really have to kind of look at options that are more customized or specific, purpose-built for your application.
Well, for us, obviously, S, L, TI, and Wolverine would be the 4 rifle cans we make. And those rifle cans obviously one can go anywhere, the other one can go. But if you're semi-auto, some kind of gas-operated rifle, you're going to want an S, and for a bolt gun, you're going to want an L, and for an AK, you're going to want a Wolverine. Or maybe you want direct thread.
And the Wolverine is a very good example of that. I mean, the Wolverine was purpose-built for Kalashnikov operating systems, for Kalashnikov thread pitches. And we knew that there was a bunch of them, so we had to make it so that it took different thread pitches. We knew going in that those guns are hugely overgassed from the start. And so the conventional Band-Aid for an AK is just put concentric threads on it and stick a conventional rifle silencer on it. Well, that doesn't yield the best results. And the Wolverine was really designed to fit that AK application very, very well. Now, it also works on a lot of other stuff really well. It actually sounds really good on any gun that's particularly overgassed. But that's a good example of sort of tuning the silencer for the given application or given rifle system that it's going to go on.
Well, we started to run an S on AK a little bit and just weren't happy with it.
It wasn't as good as it could be. It worked, and it sounded okay, but you really had to kind of tweak the gun around the can, and that's exactly what we were trying to get away with the Wolverine, was having a can that was tweaked for the gun instead of the other way around. And we do that on rifle cans too. Like Mike said, the S is no different. The S is the same thing, but it's tweaked for semi-auto rifles or machine guns, anything that's gas operated. The S is designed to be a better performer from the shooter's perspective. That doesn't mean the sound meter. That means from the shooter's perspective, a more pleasant experience to shoot. Less back pressure, great bassy tone, less gas back in your face. You know, all those things are considerations, frequently much more so than what the sound meter says.
Yeah. So tell me about sound testing, because I mean, you got the one school of thought that's let's put it off at 90 degrees from the muzzle, and that's like the standard, but that doesn't do much for the guy actually shooting the gun. And I go, no, you guys are really big on let's take a measurement from where the shooter ear is, which is more important, in my opinion. You know, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Well, it depends on the end user which one's more important. For us, it's the shooter ear. We're not like in a hide somewhere, so we're trying to make it comfortable for us. You can also muzzle of the can or muzzle of the rifle, and we measure muzzle of can, which is a little louder measurement, but I think a little bit.
Depending on the platform. Well, an AK makes it louder. So there's a ton of variables in terms of measuring and the way that people meter. Like Mike said, some people meter at the muzzle, some people meter at the muzzle of the can, some people meter at the muzzle of the gun. We meter at the muzzle of the can because that's where the sound comes out. Right. And that's the way that I think most manufacturers do it. It's not the way that a lot of people on YouTube do it. We choose to do it that way. And when we are designing and developing a can, we do make sure that our muzzle numbers are accurate. And it's going to vary. Our altitude and temperature and humidity are going to be different than somebody else. So that's why you'll see variance in those meter numbers. There's a lot of atmospheric considerations that go into play. But our muzzle numbers are repeatable here. And we don't just meter at the muzzle. Although we do it as a comparator for other people in the industry. But by far, it's not the major influencer on design or performance for us. The measurements that we take at the shooter's ear and the way that we take the measurements at the shooter's ear, which is something of a proprietary thing, those measurements are much more important to us from a developmental standpoint than muzzle numbers alone. But clearly you want a good performer at the muzzle too. Yeah. So it's a balance.
So with that, I mean, you can have a can that's going to perform better at the muzzle, but not so great at the ear,
sure,
and vice versa. So it's like,
which would make it a great bolt gun can.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all a little different, like cars or anything. It just depends on what you're really interested in, what's important to you.
Right, and a muzzle silencer now can be so effective that you can actually make it too quiet at the muzzle to where you are increasing noise at the shooter via the ejection port. Or like in the case of an AK at the gas port. So there is a diminishing return, and the quest for us is frequently finding that happy medium.
Yeah, so I don't know, I've seen a trend of everybody's trying to make their cans lighter. And it's like, so you got this super light can and it's quieter, but it's like, what are you sacrificing when you're like, reducing weight? You're going to be
sacrificing
reducing
durability.
Like, is that significant, or what's that balance of that?
Yeah, it's very significant. Take one of these ultra lightweight cans and stick it on a 7.5-inch M16. You won't have a can for very long. Yeah. It is all about durability. When you go weight, frequently your biggest trade-off is durability. And depending on whether you need that durability or not, that's up to the consumer. You know, maybe that particular application, the lightweight of it is far more important than durability. Maybe it's a guy who's never gonna, shoot the can very much. Maybe it's strictly a hunting can. You're never gonna hurt one of those lightweight cans on a bolt action rifle unless you start cutting the barrels really, really short. So it's rate of fire, barrel length, muzzle pressure, all those sorts of things come into play. And like I say, it's really an individual consumer choice. For some guys, a super, super lightweight can is the way to go, without question. But that's your major thing. If you say lightweight to me, first thing that comes to mind for me, I don't know about you, but first thing that comes to mind for me is it's not going to be that tough.
Well, and it just depends on what you want. I've never really gotten too concerned with a few ounces on a rifle. It's just running long distances with my rifle and worrying about the weight is not something that I do. So you're right about you have to get strength, you've got to have material in there. That's just all there is to it. It's like a law of physics. If you add material, you add strength,
Right.
which is going to have some mass, and you're going to have to carry it.
Yeah, and I just wonder, so you see, like, it's lighter, quieter, and stronger. I'm like, you know, it just kind of goes against.
That's a little triangle that's hard to get the right results out of. You can pick lighter or quieter, but stronger.
Yeah, it's kind of like that old saying, you know, you can have it cheap, you can have it fast, or you can have it good. Right. And those three things don't come together.
You got to pick two.
It's all trade-offs. It's all trade-offs. And for some guys, that's absolutely the right choice, to pick a very lightweight, light-duty can. Yeah. And that's actually the term I like to use a lot, is not necessarily lightweight, light-duty, because they mean the same thing. And a lot of times you'll have guys say, well, my can's auto-rated, so it must be tough enough. Well, everything's auto-rated if you don't have a machine gun.
Right. That's what I was just gonna ask. It's like what is full auto rated? Because I mean, I don't sell suppressors, but I don't know how many times I've been at the gun shop and I hear the dude say, "Oh, is it full auto rated? It has to be full auto rated." I'm like,
there are a lot
and I think the same thing. Well, do you have a machine gun?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, but when you give something a full auto rating, it's really, you know, for us, it's not just a marketing thing. If we say something's full auto rated, we are going to put it on a machine gun. You know, we are going to shoot it, and we fully expect our customers to do the same thing. But it has become, as of late, more of a marketing term than anything else. It's if you want to overcome the perception in somebody's mind that the can's not tough, people will say, well, it's full auto rated, and they think that's good enough. But, you know, all that means is they're going to warranty it when it breaks. That's all it means.
Yeah. And then it's a numbers game of, well, how many people have a machine gun? How many people are going to run that thing so hot that it melts?
Yeah, you ever seen that scene in Fight Club where he's telling them how they decide to pay out on a recall? It's the same exact thing. You know, if you know that 1% of your customers have a machine gun, then you can full auto rate everything you make, because they're not going to shoot it on one. That's not the way that we do it. If we say it's full auto rated, we use 100% Stellite baffle stacks, toughest high heat, high temp, high strength baffles that there are. And even the cans that we've been running at demos and everything else, they don't show any signs of wear, and they've been so discolored and hot on machine guns that it's crazy. So it's a full auto rating. If you're buying a lightweight full auto rated can, it just means they will warranty it when it breaks. If you're buying a full strength can like we make, and there are several other manufacturers too that make a really good, really high quality full auto rated can, but simply saying it's full auto rated doesn't really mean it's tough enough. It just means they'll fix it when it breaks.
So with that, we're talking materials.
Yep.
You brought up Stellite, but there's so many materials. You got, like, you know, aluminum, titanium.
Well, and amount of material. I mean, you could make it out of the right material, but make it too thin going for too light and lose its strength.
Yeah. So what's the pros and cons of some of the materials, though? Because, I mean, you guys have titanium and Stellite, and some guys are just making stuff out of stainless steel. You know.
Well, we use, damn the cost, the very best material for the application that we can use, whether it be titanium or aluminum or Stellite or 17.4, 316. It doesn't matter. It's going to cost what it costs, and we're going to use the very best material that we can get our hands on. I mean, you have to take that in. You don't really machine Stellite, but you wire cut it. It comes to us as a casting, you know, so it's all of its own challenges. If you decide to use Stellite, then you're going to be wire cutting, and, you know, it's a little more.
But the pro of that is it's
the toughest thing we can do.
Under high heat, under very, very hard use, under full auto use, let's say, that's the toughest baffle material out there, under high temperature.
Yeah.
So,
and a couple years ago, Inconel was like the tough stuff.
That's right.
So, like, what's the difference between the two? So they're both pretty damn tough.
Strength at temperature. Higher strength at temperature, greater abrasion resistance. That's in a nutshell. It erodes less.
And then titanium tends to be like on a precision rifle.
Yeah, I mean, you don't use titanium in a lot of applications where you want tough. You use titanium in applications where you want light. And as we've already said, that's not necessarily the same application, right?
Well, we used it in a tube on a mask and a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome for that. It's super tough.
And it's lightweight.
It's not in that red hot environment on a rimfire can or a pistol can so much. So that seems to be the best material that you could use, strongest, lightest.
Then how about aluminum? Because there's a bunch of, I see guys like running on like PRS style shooting. I'm like, guys, you're gonna jack that can up, you know, because they're out there just running it like they would have.
Well, I think, forgive me, but don't they have a 1 shot per second kind of firing schedule for it, and a barrel minimum length? So there's a restriction on length and frequency of shot. So if you stay within that, you should be fine.
But again, that's somewhat pitched as a light duty suppressor.
I'm just talking straight up, like aluminum in general. It's just got to be a lightweight and
Rimfire.
And you really need
for
to
us, it's a strictly rimfire application or handgun. Centerfire handgun or rimfire. It's not a centerfire rifle application.
And we use no aluminum in a mask and very little just in the end of the ghost. For baffles and tube as well.
So it has its place. I mean, they're all good materials. You just the quest is to put them in the right place. It's just like picking the right can. Picking the right materials is what makes it the right can for a given application.
Right. So another one that I see like in marketing a lot is the 0 point of impact shift. I mean, to me, it's like, it doesn't matter what you put on the end of your barrel, it's going to change the harmonics.
Sure.
And something is going to shift. Like, it might be repeatable every time you put a can on. That shift might be repeatable, but I mean, what is your experience with that?
We've seen muzzle brakes shift more than a can. You're going to add mass to the barrel, it's going to change it. You could never, in a police kind of law enforcement environment, change the flash hider on a patrol rifle and not re-zero it. You know, anything that you change to that, you've got to re-zero. It can be very minimal, and point of impact shift is not 5 feet or anything, but yeah.
It's also not solely the domain of the can. The point of impact shift varies greatly with the rifle itself.
Length and weight of barrel, kind of barrel.
Yeah, now that's what I figured. It's like it's not so much the can itself and
Right.
the quality of the can having 0 point of impact. It's the host that you're putting on.
If you have a 12-inch 308 with a 1-inch outside diameter barrel, it probably is not going to shift.
And that could go for clamping the can to the bottom of the barrel or the side or screwing it on the end.
Now, if you're going to experience shift, the amount of the shift, if it's going to shift, can be affected by the can, and the mounting system. But more important than does it have point of impact shift, as you mentioned, is it repeatable? Is it reliably repeatable, taking the can off and putting it back on so you don't have to re-zero every single time that you remove the can for cleaning or shoot without it, God forbid. You don't strive for having no point of impact shift because that's impossible to predict because of the variety of host guns that are out there. What you strive for is consistency, accuracy, and repeatability in terms of mounting system and the way that the baffle stack index is in relation to the bore. So once you've got that, you can't really ask more than that. The rest of it's dependent on the consumer.
Cool. Another thing people don't realize, I guess back in the day, when you put a suppressor on, you might have lost some velocity with, I don't know.
With a
Maybe
wipe,
that's a myth.
with
like
a wipe
wipes.
can.
But now it's like we're gaining velocity. I mean, it's negligible, but I mean, what's your experience with
It's
with
minimal.
that?
It's usually.
And what do you even call it?
I'd call it suppressor push, and I would tell you that it probably is going to get you 10 feet per second, maybe as much as 20 feet per second, depending on the situation. But it's probably going to be really hard for you to see, and it's going to fall within the standard deviation. If you chronographed 100 rounds with and 100 rounds without, you could tell. But just 2 or 3 rounds with or without, when it falls in the deviation, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, if you're shooting factory ammunition, it's very likely to be within the standard deviation. Only a guy that's hand-loading ammo within 3 to 5 feet per second standard deviation is going to be able to tell in short order. And even then, it's not going to be statistically enough difference when you're talking about, let's say, a 3,000 foot per second rifle cartridge to add 10 feet per second to that, it's
Well, and you can get more than that from day-to-day conditions.
Yeah.
Or morning,
Temperature.
afternoon, evening.
Yep.
So another thing is first round pop. Especially like I always notice it in my rimfire can. It's like
Yeah, rimfire's the worst with it. And centerfire handgun has it a little bit, but rimfire I think is the telltale first round pop. It's nothing more than hotter temperature exit gas when it leaves the muzzle of the can on the first round than the second round. And that's due to the fact flame will propagate further down the can while it has oxygen. It cannot support the flame on the shot too because there's no oxygen left in the can to support that combustion and let it propagate down halfway through the stack or whatever.
so some designs have louder first round pops than others. Like
Yes,
what
they do.
what I mean, what causes
Generally
that?
a monocore will. It will let, just by the nature of the style of the baffle, it will let flame go down further on the first shot. And it depends on the length of barrel and high and low velocity ammo, you know,
Rifle or
standard and
handgun,
super. Yeah. We're against, I'd like to say that Gary and I strongly oppose first round pop and fight it all we can for truth, justice, and the end user. So
Fight the pop.
there you go. We're probably going to protest somewhere. If it continues, look for us to picket places where we find it.
So if somebody's a first time buyer and they want to get into the suppressor market, like what are just a couple things that they should think about? Like what would be some guidance, you know, for those people, like so they can properly shop, you know, and not get caught up on marketing or whatever?
I would say don't get sucked into one size fits all, because it doesn't. Don't buy a silencer that you think is going to be the only one you buy, because that's the first thing everybody thinks when they go to buy one, is they're only going to buy one. And by and large, that is not the case.
I never thought that.
You're a special case. But you got to put the time in and figure out which one's right for you. There's a lot of good options on the market, and not just from us. There's a lot of good options
Sure.
on the market. But don't get roped into thinking that just one silencer is going to be the right thing for everything that you've got. If you fall into that trap, you're going to end up with something that years later you're going to have what I call a pretty bad case of stamp regret on, when it sits in the back of your safe and it becomes a loaner can for your buddy with no can. So I would say just do the research, figure out what the best can is for your primary application, whatever that may be, because it might be rimfire for somebody. It might be a hunting can. It might be, you know, a can for his SBR, you know, and those are all different cans. They are different cans. And just figure out what your primary application is going to be, where you're going to get the most use and the most enjoyment out of it up front, and then do the research and find the can that's the right can for that application.
Most people dip their toe into the rimfire market, first-time buyers, because it's almost unlimited hosts, and they're affordable, and you already have them. And there's sub ammo and super ammo, and it makes the greatest difference overall. It's got the biggest percentage of gain. And
It's also the can people use the most. I mean,
rimfire's fun.
yeah, it's the quietest. It's the most fun to shoot. It's the least expensive to shoot still, now that you can get ammo again. But even guys that have a lot of stamps and a lot of cans, most of the time they're going to shoot rimfire more than anything else. I know I do.
It's a staple.
We shoot way more rimfire just from a casual perspective than anything else. Well, maybe 7.62 by 39, but
I don't know if I'd say that. We may shoot more rimfire on a given day, but it's always there. It's like a little friend that you never really lose communication with.
Well, and you can't. I think I'm nearing half a dozen rimfire cans, or so. You know,
Which is the right amount.
It's
With
about-
a wife and 2 sons, you've got to have 4.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean they're not all. They're every one of them's different. I don't have any one that's the same.
2 more questions, and we probably should ask this at the very first. Like, how does a suppressor work? You know, what's the main? How do you suppress a gun? with a suppressor? What's going on with there?
Well, there's two main things there. You've got sound and heat. So I would compare it best to a oxygen acetylene torch. If you crank an oxygen acetylene torch, acetylene and oxygen, you can hardly tell it's on. But when you strike it, the gas coming out doesn't make any more or less noise, but the temperature differential that you have from that 2,000 degree fireball is the same thing that makes a fire audible, or a jet engine, or anything where you have a great ambient air and then superheated air is introduced to it. In a gunfire, it's a huge blast forced into ambient air, and that's where you get the bulk of your noise from. So if you slow those gases down and allow them to cool a little bit and come out slower with lower pressure, you've pretty much won. I mean, there's supersonic bullet flight, and there is some harmonic sound dampening going on in there, but I would say the temp differential is probably the biggest.
Yep, slow and cool the gas, and you've done it.
Cool. And the last one, this is a little more current event. Because I had this debate a few times, like the whole Hearing Protection Act. If that passes, what do you see happening in the industry as a whole?
The market will explode. You'll see every silencer that's available for sale sold virtually immediately, regardless of price. And you'll probably see a period of, a lot like Mike likes to use the example of the rimfire market, where the rimfire is being made as fast as it can, but you still can't get it. I suspect you'll see likely the same thing with suppressors. Everything that's out will be gone, and everything that can be made by everybody who can make them for a couple years will likely be sold before it ever leaves the factory. So in the event of deregulation, in the event of Hearing Protection Act passage, I foresee market growth, the likes of which the firearms industry has realistically never seen. And not just for cans, for firearms also, or for threaded barrels, or, I mean, if HPA passes, good luck selling a gun with no threads.
I would liken it to abolishing prohibition to a thirsty crowd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I see, probably have everybody with the machine shop's going to be making them.
Sure.
So what's going to happen? I mean, you guys obviously have tons of R&D behind all your product, but then you got other guys who don't have all that, but they're going to make it because they can.
Sure.
So what do you think overall quality and
I think
how
how
consumers
in the
gonna...
same way. I mean, just for example, and I'm not hammering any manufacturer, but High Point has its set of customers and it focuses on inexpensive. But I have a feeling that Glock sells a lot more pistols than they do. And they focus on, making a great pistol. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, just because you can buy a High Point doesn't mean you will.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with anything, that's for sale. You might buy a Mercedes, but you can buy a Kia Rio or whatever.
cars, watches, shoes,
it doesn't
chairs.
matter what it is. There's always going to be a low-cost provider. There'll always be a low-cost provider. That's not us, and we're okay with that. We want to be Glock, HK, that's kind of where we're at if you want to put it in a gun analogy. I mean, we're an R&D intensive company. We're a products-driven company. We're a performance-driven company, much more so than price. It's like Mike said earlier, the price comes in at the very end when it's already finished. Then they hand it to me and said, here's what's in it, price it out. That's when that happens. It's not on the front side, we're trying to hit this price point. It's let's make the very best product we can make, and then it will cost what it costs.
Well, let's say we could make and form to a freeze plug can this afternoon, but I have no want to. I mean, you could give me the freeze plugs and the mag light, and I'm like, thanks, but no thanks. Like, sorry, but it doesn't interest me.
Well, there'll always be the people that just think it's a steel tube with baffles, and that's all there is to it. But that's a very disinterested approach. That's like comparing a Kia Rio to a Mercedes. It's the same thing. I mean, it doesn't have moving parts, and I think that's why a lot of people think that. Because as soon as you add moving parts to something, typically people start thinking it's way more complex. But baffle spacing, baffle type, baffle shape, you know, all of those things come into play. And I can tell you from experience of looking at 5-gallon buckets full of silencer cores, little teeny tweaks. I mean, it's all the little things that you change that make a big difference. And frankly, the average low-cost provider doesn't have the time or the money to put into that product to put it even on a level footing with, say, the top 5 manufacturers.
Well, it wouldn't be low-cost product then.
Right.
Cool. That's all I had, guys. I just, I mean, being a consumer and being shopping and also being part of the industry where I'm doing marketing, it's like I see there's a lot of marketing hype and a lot of like reality, and I just figured I'd talk to the experts and get your opinion on that. So
no, we agree. We're not just owners, we're clients.
We are that. We're consumers of NFA for sure.
So cool. All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.